we can implement the interface in another repository, which I'll simply call country repository, without the capital letter I. And I'll place it into the services folder as well. So I'll create another class, and I'll call it country repository. Now, in order for us to be able to implement the interface, we need to add it to the class. So we'll add it to I country repository. Now, as you can see, it's underlined, and that's because we need to now implement it. If I hover over it, you can see that it's asking to implement all those methods. So I'm just going to click and implement interface, and it provided us with the basic implementation of all those methods, and basically just throw in exception in each of them. Of course, we will edit them to do what we want them to do. Now, all the database querying is going to be done by the book DBContext that we created and which implements the DBContext class. Through this context, we will be able to interact with the database. So let's bring in the book DBContext into the class. So first, I'm going to create a private variable of type book DBContext. So up here, I'll create a variable of type book DBContext, and I'll call it country context. I use the underscore here to indicate that this is a private variable. And now I have to bring the instance of the book DBContext into the class and assign it to this variable. And for that, we will simply pass it into the constructor. So let's create a constructor. And in it, I'll pass the book DBContext, and I'll just call it country context, and assign that to our variable. So country context will equal country context argument. Alright, so now let's tackle our first method, getCountries. Now they are not in order you may expect because they are in alphabetical order, but we'll go by the more logical use, which is getCountries and then getCountry by ID. So in the getCountries, we want to receive all the countries from the database. We now have the DBContext available and assigned to our country context variable. So we can simply return the results of a query from the country context. So we can do return, and here we'll use the country context that we created. And if I press dot, you can see I have a lot of things available. And the ones we are interested in are the DB sets that we defined in the book DBContext class. So let's have a look at that first. So I'll go to Solution Explorer and look at the book DBContext. And you can see here are all our DB sets. And one of them is DB set for the country, right here. So this is the DB set we want to use to interact with the countries table. So let's go back to our repository. So we have the context, and now we'll call the countries DB set. So I will call back to .countries. So this gives us all the countries. But we probably don't want to just return the countries in the order of their IDs, which would be the default. I want to return the whole collection sorted alphabetically by the country name. For that, we can use a simple lambda expression with the command order by. So we will do dot, and you can see we have order by available here, and we'll use the lambda expression to order by the name. So since it's a country, I'll use C, and C goes into the name. So we'll order by the name, and you can see that it's still complaining, and that's because it says it cannot implicitly convert the I ordered queryable to the I collection. So what we have to do is to just turn it into a list. Alright, so this is our first method. The next one is to get a single country. I'm going to copy this whole thing and paste it into the body of that method. So to get country by ID here, I'll paste it right there. So we are still returning from countries DB set, except we only want a single country. So let's delete everything starting from order by, because here we're returning a single country, so there's nothing to order. Instead, we want to filter the result to match the country whose ID is being passed into this method. And for that, we can use the where clause. And here, we will specify a lambda expression. And this lambda expression will simply select the country whose ID matches the argument country ID. So again, we'll do C for country. C goes into the C ID that matches the country ID. So this will find a country that matches the ID. But now we need to ensure that if no country is found, we return a default value which is null, and when a country is found, we will simply return that country. So we use a C# method first or default that will do just that. So we will append to it first or default. So it will return either the first country that finds the matching ID with the argument, or if no country matches the ID, then it will return a default which would be null. So now let's do the third method, which is going to be slightly more complicated. But only slightly, I promise.